The Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed such silence. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire found his forearms trembling as he stared at the empty seats where the human delegation once sat. The crystalline walls that had amplified countless voices of cooperation now seemed to mock them with their transparent clarity. "They're really gone," whispered Council Speaker Mira Thess, her blue-scaled hands clutching the podium. The Aquarian leader's gills fluttered rapidly, a sign of extreme distress that every species present recognized. The human withdrawal from the Galactic Council hadn't been dramatic. No shouting matches, no declarations of war, no threats. Admiral Sarah Chun had simply stood up during the middle of a heated debate about resource allocation, looked around the chamber with those unsettling human eyes that seemed to see through everything, and spoken 5 words that would echo through galactic history. Humanity chooses a different path. That had been 3 standard months ago. Since then, human colonies across 47 star systems had gone silent. Not destroyed, not conquered, just silent. Their communication networks still functioned, their ships still moved through space, but they no longer answered calls from other species. It was as if humanity had simply decided the rest of the galaxy no longer existed. Ambassador Zethkar remembered the early days when humans first joined the Council. They had been so eager, so optimistic. Unlike other species that took centuries to adapt to galactic politics, humans had embraced cooperation immediately. They shared their music, their art, their strange human concepts of humor and hope. They had become the bridge between species that had been enemies for millennia. The Vorthak and the Kepler had been locked in a territorial dispute for 300 years until a human mediator named Marcus Rodriguez had somehow convinced both sides to establish a joint research station. The Crystalline Collective had refused all contact with organic life forms until human scientists had developed translation matrices that could convert their light-based communication into something others could understand. Wherever there was conflict, humans seemed to appear with solutions nobody else had considered. But perhaps that should have been the first warning sign. Humans were too good at understanding other species, too quick to find common ground where none had existed before. They possessed an almost supernatural ability to see patterns and connections that escaped even the most advanced artificial intelligences. The Nexari, who prided themselves on their logical thinking, had been repeatedly outmaneuvered by human negotiators who somehow managed to find win-win scenarios in the most impossible situations. Now Trade Coordinator Velnox was reading reports that made Zethkar's blood run cold. Human merchant ships are still operating, the insectoid being clicked through his translator. But they only trade with each other now. They've established new shipping routes that completely bypass all non-human worlds. "What about the joint research projects?" asked Dr. Thrain Shi, the ethereal representative whose translucent form flickered with anxiety. The fusion reactor initiative alone involved 17 different species. "Abandoned," Velnox replied. "All human scientists have withdrawn. They left behind detailed notes and research data, but refused to explain their conclusions. Our best theoretical physicists are struggling to understand work that human graduate students were performing routinely." The implications were staggering. Humans have been involved in virtually every major scientific breakthrough of the last 50 years. Their unique approach to problem-solving had accelerated galactic technological advancement by centuries. They didn't just think outside conventional parameters. They seemed to exist outside them entirely. Defense Minister Kor-ADH, a massive titan whose stone-like hide bore the scars of 1,000 battles, spoke in his rumbling voice. "My intelligence networks report something far more disturbing. Human military installations aren't just silent. They're invisible. Impossible," scoffed General Zenfos of the Raptor Alliance. "Our sensors can detect a grain of sand from 3 light years away. Try detecting a human base now," Kor-ADH challenged. 6 months ago, we knew the location of every human military facility in the galaxy. Today, we can't find a single one. Either they've developed stealth technology that surpasses our understanding, or they've moved their entire military infrastructure somewhere we can't reach. The chamber erupted in concerned chatter. The Galactic Council had always maintained detailed records of all member species' military capabilities. It was a fundamental requirement for membership, designed to prevent any single species from gaining overwhelming advantage. But humans had apparently found a way to hide their strength completely. Council Speaker Mirathes called for order, but her voice carried none of its usual authority. We need to consider the possibility that humanity has discovered something we don't understand. Their withdrawal might not be isolationism. It might be preparation. Preparation for what? Demanded Ambassador Alexandra of the Cosmic Federation. Before anyone could answer, the chamber's communication array activated. A holographic image appeared in the center of the room, showing Admiral Sarah Chun. She looked exactly as she had 3 months ago, calm, professional, and completely unreadable. But there was something different in her expression, something that made every being in the chamber instinctively step back. "Greetings, council members," she said in that measured tone humans used when they were being carefully diplomatic. "I bring a message from a human collective." Zethkar noticed she didn't say humanity or Earth or any of the traditional identifiers. Human collective was something new, something that suggested a fundamental change in how humans saw themselves. "We want you to know that our withdrawal from the council was not made in anger or disappointment. You have all been valuable allies and partners. But humanity has reached a crossroads in our development, and we must take a path that leads away from galactic civilization as it currently exists." "What are you talking about?" interrupted General Zenfos. "What kind of development requires complete isolation?" Admiral Chin's smile was gentle but somehow terrifying. "The kind that transforms a species from galactic citizens into something else entirely. We've learned things about the universe that change everything. Things that make our previous cooperation with you not just impossible, but potentially dangerous." "Dangerous to whom?" Mirathes asked. "To all of us," Chin replied. "The universe is not what we thought it was. Reality itself operates according to principles that none of our species fully understand. But humans, it seems, have a unique relationship with these principles. We can perceive and manipulate aspects of existence that others cannot." The chamber fell silent. Several species were telepathic. Others had consciousness that existed partially outside normal space-time, and the ethereals were essentially living energy. But none of them had ever claimed to see beyond the fundamental structure of reality itself. "We're not abandoning the galaxy," Chen continued. "We're evolving beyond it. What humanity is becoming is too powerful and too different to safely coexist with other forms of life. Our presence would inevitably lead to imbalance, possibly to the destruction of everything we've all built together." Ambassador Zethkar found his voice. "You're talking about transcendence." "Yes," Chin said simply, though that word doesn't adequately describe what's happening to us. Human consciousness is expanding beyond biological limitations. We're becoming something that exists on multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. Every day, our understanding of space, time, and causality grows deeper. "And you're all changing?" Dr. Thrainchi asked. "Every human in the galaxy?" "Every human who chooses to," Chin confirmed. "It's not forced, but very few have chosen to remain as they were. The pull toward this new existence is overwhelming once you understand what's possible." Trade Coordinator Velnox's mandibles clicked rapidly. "This explains the disappearing military bases. You're not hiding them. You're moving them outside normal space." "Among other things," Chen acknowledged, "we exist in dimensions you can't perceive, move through space in ways that bypass your detection systems, and understand time itself as a manipulable resource. What you call physics, we now experience as suggestions rather than laws." The implications hit the Council like a cosmic shockwave. If humans could manipulate space-time itself, if they existed partially outside normal reality, then Traditional concepts of military power, diplomacy, and even survival meant nothing. A species that could step outside the universe at will couldn't be threatened, couldn't be bargained with, and couldn't be understood by those still confined to normal existence. Why are you telling us this? Council Speaker Mirathes asked. Because you deserve to know why we left, Chen replied. And because you need to understand what's coming. Humanity's transformation is just the beginning. We've detected other species in distant parts of the galaxy who are approaching similar evolutionary thresholds. The universe is changing, becoming more than it was before. Are you threatening us? General Zin Fos demanded. Admiral Chen's expression became infinitely sad. We're warning you. The old galaxy, the one where different species cooperate and compete within understood parameters, is ending. What comes next will be stranger and more wonderful and more terrifying than anything you can imagine. Will we ever see humans again? Ambassador Zethkar asked. You're seeing us now, Chen said. We haven't gone anywhere. We're all around you, existing in spaces between the spaces you know. But the humans you knew, the ones who sat in your councils and shared your concerns about resource allocation and trade disputes, those humans are becoming something else. The hologram began to flicker and fade. We wish you well in what's coming. You'll need each other more than you ever realized. As Admiral Chen's image disappeared, the council chamber remained silent for long minutes. Finally, Council Speaker Mirathes spoke in a whisper that carried throughout the crystalline halls. The galaxy just became a much larger and more dangerous place. Outside the council chambers, ships from 100 different species hung in space around the massive station. But if any of their sensors had been capable of detecting it, they would have seen other ships, human ships that existed in the spaces between dimensions, watching everything with eyes that now saw far beyond the visible spectrum. The humans were still there. They had just become something that the rest of the galaxy couldn't understand, couldn't touch, and couldn't fight. And, according to Admiral Chun, they weren't the only ones changing. Captain Rex Morrison of the merchant vessel Star Runner had always prided himself on understanding the galaxy's political landscape. 23 years of trading between worlds had taught him which species to trust, which ones to avoid, and how to navigate the complex web of alliances that kept galactic civilization functioning. But as his ship drifted dead in space, surrounded by the twisted wreckage of what had once been the Kepler mining station, he realized that all his experience meant nothing anymore. The station hadn't been destroyed by weapons. There were no blast marks, no signs of battle, no debris patterns that matched any known form of attack. Instead, the massive structure looked like it had been unraveled from the inside out, its metal corridors twisted into impossible geometries that hurt to look at. Sections of the station existed in multiple places simultaneously, creating optical illusions that made Rex's navigation officer vomit whenever she tried to plot their position. "Captain," called Engineer Martinez from the engine room, his voice tight with panic. "Our fusion reactor isn't responding to normal control inputs. The plasma containment field keeps fluctuating in patterns I've never seen before." Rex knew Martinez had 30 years of experience with every type of reactor in the galaxy. If he couldn't understand what was happening to their engine, then they were dealing with something completely outside known technology. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Singh, "I'm detecting strange signals from 17 different star systems. They're not distress calls exactly, but they're not normal traffic either. It's like entire planets are trying to communicate in languages that don't exist." Through the view screen, Rex could see other ships in the area, vessels from a dozen different species, all maintaining careful distances from each other. The universal translator was producing gibberish when they tried to communicate, as if the very concept of language was breaking down. Even species that had been allies for centuries were treating each other with suspicion and fear. Rex activated his personal log recorder. Someone needed to document what was happening, even if no one would ever hear it. Captain's log, standard date 2387.156. We responded to an automated distress beacon from Kepler mining station in the Sigma Draconis system. What we found doesn't match anything in our databases. He paused, staring at the twisted station. The structure appears to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Our sensors are detecting materials that register as both solid matter and empty space. The station's quantum signature is fluctuating between frequencies that shouldn't be possible under normal physics. A new voice cut through the ship's communication system, speaking in perfect standard galactic despite the universal translator's failures everywhere else. Captain Morrison, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez speaking from the research vessel Prometheus. Are you receiving this transmission clearly? Rex's blood chilled. Dr. Vasquez had been reported dead 6 months ago when her ship disappeared during a routine survey mission. But there she was, speaking as if nothing had happened. Dr. Vasquez, this is Captain Morrison. Our records show your ship was lost in the Vega system. How are you here? Time isn't working the way you think it is anymore, Rex. Her voice carried an odd echo, as if she was speaking from multiple locations at once. What you call past and future are becoming fluid. Events are happening in orders that don't follow causality as you understand it. On the view screen, a ship materialized near the ruined station. It looked like Dr. Vasquez's research vessel, but wrong somehow. Its hull seemed to phase in and out of existence, and its engine signature registered on sensors that weren't designed to detect anything like it. Elena, what happened to you? Rex asked. Your ship, your crew, what happened to all of you? We encountered something in the Vegas system, she replied. Not aliens, not technology. We encountered space itself, changing into something new. Reality began rewriting itself around us, showing us possibilities we never imagined. Rex watched through the view screen as figures moved inside Vasquez's ship. They looked human, but they moved in ways that suggested they weren't entirely confined to normal space. They seemed to exist in multiple positions simultaneously, creating afterimages that his eyes couldn't quite process. The barriers between dimensions are dissolving, Vasquez continued. What humans always thought of as parallel universes aren't parallel anymore. They're converging, overlapping, creating regions where the impossible becomes routine. Engineer Martinez's voice crackled through the intercom. Captain, our engine readings just spiked beyond maximum safe levels, but the reactor temperature is actually dropping. I don't understand how this is possible. Because your technology is being influenced by different physical laws, Vasquez explained, somehow hearing their internal communications. The same energy that powers your fusion reactor is now operating under multiple sets of rules simultaneously. In some dimensional states, fusion is more efficient. In others, it's impossible. Communications Officer Singh reported from her station. Sir, I'm detecting massive electromagnetic anomalies throughout this entire region. It's like space itself is becoming electrically charged. Through the view screen, Rex could see other ships beginning to experience problems. A Vorthack cruiser was spinning helplessly as its navigation systems failed to agree on which direction was forward. An Aquarian transport vessel was flickering in and out of visibility as if it couldn't decide whether to exist in normal space or somewhere else entirely. This is what humans discovered, Dr. Vasquez said. Reality isn't fixed. The universe we all grew up in, with its reliable physics and predictable cause and effect relationships, was just one possibility among infinite others. Humans developed the ability to perceive these other possibilities and eventually to choose which version of reality they wanted to inhabit. Are you saying humans caused this? Rex demanded. Not caused, enabled. Human consciousness has a unique property that allows it to observe quantum possibilities without collapsing them into single outcomes. Most species can only perceive one version of reality at a time. Humans can see them all and choose which one to make real. The implications made Rex's head spin. If humans could literally choose which version of reality they wanted to experience, then they weren't just technologically superior to other species. They were operating on a completely different level of existence. But it's spreading, Vasquez continued. Human transformation is affecting the quantum structure of space-time itself. Regions where humans have lived are becoming unstable, reality is becoming fluid, and other species are beginning to experience multiple versions of existence simultaneously. On his sensor readings, Rex could see the effect she was describing. The areas of space where human colonies had existed were showing quantum fluctuations that extended far beyond the original settlements. It was as if humanity's evolution into something beyond normal reality was contaminating the universe around them. The Kepler mining station was run jointly by humans and Kepler natives, Vasquez explained. When the human workers began their transformation, the station became caught between different versions of reality. What you're seeing is the result of a structure that exists in multiple dimensional states without the consciousness to choose between them. Rex stared at the twisted wreckage with new understanding. The station wasn't destroyed, it was trapped in quantum superposition, existing as all possible versions of itself simultaneously. Without human consciousness to collapse the possibilities into a single reality, it remained frozen in a state of infinite potential. "Elena, what happened to your crew?" he asked again. "We evolved," she said simply. "Some of us chose to remain partially human so we could serve as interpreters for what's coming. Others embraced full transformation and now exist in dimensions you can't perceive. A few chose to return to baseline humanity, but they remember everything they saw. The knowledge of what's possible changes you forever." Rex felt a chill run through his entire ship. "You're saying this is permanent? The galaxy isn't going back to the way it was?" "No," Vasquez confirmed. "Human transformation has initiated a cascade effect. Reality itself is evolving, becoming more complex, more layered, more alive. Other species will eventually face the same choice humans did: evolve or remain confined to increasingly small regions where old-style physics still applies." Through his sensors, Rex detected new ships appearing throughout the system. They looked familiar: crystalline collective vessels, ethereal transports, even some Titan warships, but like Vasquez's vessel, they seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Other species were beginning to experience the same quantum evolution that had transformed humanity. The crystalline collective was first, Vasquez reported, as if reading his thoughts. Their light-based consciousness adapted to multidimensional existence more easily than biological species. The ethereals followed quickly, since they were already partially outside normal matter. Even the Titans, for all their physical density, are beginning to experience quantum consciousness. "What about species like mine?" Rex asked. "Regular humans, Aquarians, Vorthak, species that are still completely biological." "You have choices to make," she replied. "You can attempt to find regions of space where reality remains stable and traditional physics still apply. There are some, though they're becoming smaller every day. Or you can begin the process of evolution yourselves. And if we refuse? If we want to remain as we are?" The pause before Vasquez answered seemed to last forever. "Then you'll become like the Kepler station, caught between realities, existing in all possible states simultaneously, never able to choose which version of existence to make real. It's not death, but it's not life as you understand it either." Rex looked around his bridge crew: Martinez, Singh, Navigation Officer Kells, all of them staring at their instruments with expressions of growing panic as familiar technology began behaving according to rules they couldn't understand. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Time isn't linear anymore," Vasquez replied. "You might have years to decide, or the choice might be forced on you in the next few minutes. Reality is becoming increasingly unpredictable as more species undergo transformation." On the long-range sensors, Rex could detect massive energy signatures moving through space at impossible speeds. Ships, structures, entire civilizations that existed in states his instruments couldn't properly categorize. The galaxy was filling up with evolved intelligences that operated according to principles his species couldn't comprehend. "Elena, is there any way to go back? To return things to the way they were?" "Would you want to?" she asked. Now that you know what's possible, now that you understand that consciousness itself can reshape reality, the universe is becoming alive, aware, capable of infinite complexity and beauty. The old galaxy, where species competed for limited resources within fixed physical laws, seems small and gray by comparison. Rex realized she was right. Despite his fear, despite his confusion, he felt a growing excitement about the possibilities she was describing. The idea that reality itself could be shaped by conscious will, that the universe could become something more than it had been before, was simultaneously terrifying and wonderful. "What I need to do?" he asked. "Open your mind to possibilities you've never considered," Vasquez replied. "Stop thinking of physics as limitations and start thinking of them as suggestions. Allow your consciousness to expand beyond the boundaries of your biological brain. Most importantly, trust that the universe wants you to grow into something greater." As she spoke, Rex felt something changing in his perception. The twisted Kepler station began to make sense, its impossible geometries revealing themselves as higher-dimensional structures that could exist perfectly well in expanded space-time. His ship's malfunctioning systems weren't broken. They were trying to operate according to more sophisticated rules than they had been designed for. "We're all evolving together," Vasquez said. "Humans were just the first to make the leap. The galaxy is becoming something unimaginably complex and beautiful, filled with consciousness that can shape reality itself. You have the choice to be part of that transformation." Rex looked at his crew and saw the same mixture of fear and excitement in their faces. They were standing at the threshold of something unprecedented in galactic history. Behind them lay the familiar universe of limited resources and fixed physical laws. Ahead lay infinite possibility and the chance to become something greater than any species had ever imagined. The galaxy was indeed trembling, but it wasn't from fear of human abandonment. It was from the anticipation of its own transformation into something magnificent and alive. General Thrackmore had commanded Titan battle fleets for over 2 centuries, his massive stone-like frame bearing the scars of 1,000 conflicts across the galaxy. He had never retreated from any enemy, never questioned his ability to understand and overcome any threat through superior firepower and tactical planning. But as he stood in the command center of his flagship Worldbreaker, watching real-time tactical displays that showed impossible data, he felt something he had never experienced before: complete strategic helplessness. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer Krendar, his voice trembling despite his attempts to maintain military composure. "Enemy fleet movements are not following any recognizable pattern. They appear to be attacking targets that don't exist and defending positions in empty space." Through the massive view screen, Thrackmore could see the battle unfolding around the Nexus Prime system. Or rather, he could see dozens of battles occurring simultaneously in the same space, each one following different tactical realities. Human ships phased in and out of existence, appearing behind his formations, attacking from directions that weren't geometrically possible, and achieving objectives that made no tactical sense. "Fleet status report," Thrackmore commanded, trying to maintain some semblance of military order. 60% of our vessels are reporting navigation system failures," Krendar replied. "Our weapons are targeting enemy ships, but the targets keep shifting between dimensional phases. We're essentially firing at ghosts." The Titan general had brought 1,200 warships to this engagement, the largest battle fleet assembled in galactic history. Intelligence reports had suggested that human military forces were concentrated around Nexus Prime, preparing for some unknown operation. The Galactic Council had authorized a preemptive strike to prevent humanity from completing whatever transformation they had begun. But this wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration of how completely irrelevant traditional warfare had become. "Sir," called Communications Officer Velvi, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen's flagship. She's requesting to speak with you personally." Thrackmore's 4-inch thick hide couldn't hide his surprise. Admiral Sarah Chen's ship had been destroyed in the first wave of their attack, its quantum signature completely dispersed across local space. Yet somehow she was still communicating with them. "Put her through," he ordered. Admiral Chen's holographic image materialized in the command center, but it was wrong in ways that made Thrackmore's combat-hardened senses recoil. She appeared to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, her form shifting between different potential versions of herself. Sometimes she looked exactly as she had during council meetings, sometimes she appeared as pure energy, and occasionally she seemed to exist as mathematical equations made visible. "General Thrackmore," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking from several dimensional states at once. "You've brought an impressive fleet. Under normal circumstances, it would be more than capable of accomplishing your mission. Surrender now, Chun," Thrackmore growled, "and we'll consider allowing human evacuation to designated containment worlds." Admiral Chen's expression was infinitely sad. "You still think this is about territory, don't you? About resources and military control. You don't understand what you're fighting." On the tactical display, Thrackmore could see human ships performing maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat. They were attacking his vessels from inside their own hulls, emerging from hyperspace coordinates that were already occupied by other ships, and somehow firing weapons that traveled backwards through time to hit targets before the triggers were pulled. "Our sensors indicate you have approximately 800 vessels in this system," Thrackmore said. "We outnumber you significantly." "No," Chen replied gently. "You have 1,200 ships existing in one-dimensional state. We have 800 ships existing in infinite dimensional states. Every human vessel you see represents countless versions of itself, each one operating in different probability streams simultaneously." Tactical Officer Krendar's voice carried barely controlled panic. "General, enemy vessels are appearing inside our formation despite our shields being at maximum strength. They're not penetrating our defenses. They're manifesting in spaces our shields can't affect." Thrackmore watched in growing horror as human ships materialized inside the hulls of his largest dreadnoughts. But instead of causing collisions, they seemed to exist in the same space without interference, as if matter itself had become optional for human technology. "This is impossible," he declared. "No technology can allow solid objects to occupy the same space." "Solidity is a choice now," Admiral Chen explained. "Human consciousness has learned to exist in quantum superposition. We can be matter or energy, present or absent, here or there, as circumstances require. Your weapons can't hit targets that exist in probability rather than fixed reality." The general's tactical training told him to adapt, to find new strategies for an unprecedented enemy. But how do you fight opponents who could choose which version of physics applied to them? How do you plan attacks against forces that existed in multiple realities simultaneously? "Sir," reported Weapons Officer Brackell, "our plasma cannons are connecting with enemy targets, but the damage is being distributed across multiple dimensional states. We're destroying versions of their ships that don't affect the versions that are attacking us." Admiral Chen nodded as if she had heard the report. "Your weapons are designed to interact with matter that exists in single quantum states. When you destroy one version of our ships, infinite other versions continue to exist. But when our weapons hit your vessels, they affect the only version of you that exists." To demonstrate her point, a human destroyer materialized directly in front of Thrackmore's flagship and fired a single energy beam. The beam struck the Worldbreaker's forward armor, but instead of the expected explosion, the entire section simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just absent, as if it had never been built. "We're not removing matter," Chen explained. "We're editing reality itself. That section of your ship now exists in a probability state where it was never constructed. Your crew's memories will adjust to compensate for the change, but the strategic result is the same." Thrackmore stared at the impossible gap in his ship's hull. His engineering staff will be trying to understand how a section of the ship could simply not exist while everything around it remained perfectly intact. Their reports would show no structural damage, no missing materials, just empty space where armor plating should have been. "This isn't warfare," he said. "This is something else entirely." "Yes," Admiral Chen agreed. "This is consciousness operating at a level where reality becomes malleable. We're not fighting you, General. We're demonstrating why fighting has become meaningless." On the tactical display, Thrakmore could see his fleet beginning to disintegrate not from damage, but from confusion. Ships were reporting navigational readings that contradicted each other, weapon systems that fired in directions that didn't exist, and crew members who were beginning to remember events that had never happened. "What are you doing to my people?" he demanded. "Nothing hostile," Chen replied. "But human transformation affects the quantum structure of local space-time. Your crews are beginning to experience multiple probability streams simultaneously. Without the consciousness techniques to manage multidimensional perception, they're becoming overwhelmed by infinite potential realities." Medical Officer Gralthon's voice echoed through the command center. "General, we have crew members throughout the fleet reporting psychological disturbances. They're claiming to remember battles we haven't fought, victories and defeats that never occurred. Some are insisting they died in combat, while others believe they're fighting alongside human allies instead of against human enemies." Thrakmore realized his fleet wasn't just losing a battle. It was losing coherent connection to reality itself. His soldiers, trained for 2 centuries of conventional warfare, were experiencing quantum consciousness without any preparation or understanding. They were being forced to perceive infinite versions of the conflict simultaneously, with no way to distinguish between what was real and what was possible. "We came here to prevent human expansion from destabilizing galactic civilization," Thrakmore said. "But you're telling us that expansion is inevitable." "Not expansion," Chen corrected. "Evolution. The entire galaxy is changing, becoming something more complex and beautiful than it was before. Humans were simply the first to embrace the transformation. Every species will eventually face the same choice we made. And if we refuse..." Admiral Chen's expression became infinitely compassionate. "Look around you, General. You're already experiencing the effects. Reality is becoming fluid whether you choose to participate or not. The question isn't whether change will happen, but whether you'll guide it or be overwhelmed by it." Through the view screen, Thrakmore could see other ships in his fleet beginning to phase between dimensional states. Some flickered in and out of existence as their crews struggled with quantum consciousness. Others seemed to split into multiple versions of themselves, each one pursuing different tactical objectives in parallel reality streams. "My people are warriors," Thrakmore said. "We understand strength and conflict. We don't understand consciousness manipulation and probability engineering." "Neither did humans initially," Chen replied. "But consciousness is just another tool, like any weapon or shield system. It can be learned, trained, improved through practice. The difference is that consciousness tools can reshape reality instead of just operating within it." Tactical Officer Krendar's voice was barely audible. "Sir, I'm reading human reinforcements arriving in the system, but they're not coming from any direction in normal space. They're emerging from dimensions we don't have sensors for." On the display, Thrakmore could see the reinforcements Chen's officer was detecting. Hundreds of human vessels were materializing around the battlefield, but they weren't traveling through space in any recognizable way. They seemed to be stepping sideways from parallel universes where the battle had different outcomes, bringing with them tactical advantages from realities where they had already won. "This is your final demonstration," Admiral Chen said. "We could have ended this engagement immediately by editing your fleet out of existence. Instead, we've shown you what consciousness can accomplish when it operates beyond biological limitations. Your people are experiencing multidimensional awareness for the first time. With proper training, they could learn to navigate infinite realities as easily as they currently navigate normal space." Thrakmore made the hardest decision of his military career. "All ships stand down. Cease all offensive operations. Sir, Krindar asked in disbelief. We're not retreating, the general explained. We're acknowledging that this conflict operates according to rules we don't understand. Continuing to fight would be like using stone weapons against fusion reactors. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. Your tactical assessment is correct. But we're not your enemies, General. We're your potential allies in a universe that's becoming larger and more wonderful than any of us previously imagined. What do you want from us? Nothing, she replied. But we can offer you something invaluable, the chance to become more than you were before. Your people's warrior instincts, their strategic thinking, their absolute dedication to protecting what they value, these qualities would be incredibly powerful when combined with quantum consciousness abilities. The general looked around his command center, seeing his crew struggling to comprehend their experiences of multiple reality states. They were some of the finest military minds in the galaxy, but they were completely unprepared for existence that transcended normal space-time limitations. Where do we begin? He asked. By accepting that the universe is not your enemy, Chen replied. It's an infinite field of possibilities waiting for consciousness sophisticated enough to explore them. Humans have taken the first steps toward that exploration. Now it's time for other species to choose their own paths toward transcendence. As Admiral Chen's image began to fade, the human fleet around them started to withdraw. But they weren't moving through normal space. They were simply stepping sideways into dimensional states where they had never been present, leaving behind a Titan battle group that would never again see warfare as they had understood it. General Thrackmore realized that the galaxy's transformation wasn't something that could be fought or prevented. It was something that had to be embraced, guided, and shaped by consciousness that was ready to grow beyond every limitation they had previously accepted. The age of traditional galactic civilization was ending. What came next would be determined by how many species had the courage to evolve along with the universe itself. Dr. Lysander Cree had spent 40 years studying xenopsychology, becoming the galaxy's foremost expert on how different species' consciousness worked. His research facility on Meridian Station housed the most sophisticated consciousness mapping equipment ever constructed, devices capable of analyzing thought patterns from over 300 different species. But as he stared at the readouts from his latest scan, he realized that all his expertise had become obsolete in the span of a few hours. The data was impossible. The consciousness readings he was detecting suggested the presence of beings that thought in ways no biological brain should be able to achieve. They processed information through multiple dimensional states simultaneously, maintained awareness across probability streams that existed in parallel realities, and somehow managed to experience time as a malleable resource rather than a fixed constraint. Professor called his research assistant, Dr. Maya Patel, her voice tight with excitement and fear. The consciousness signatures are getting stronger. Whatever's causing these readings is approaching our position. Through the station's observation deck, Dr. Cree could see nothing unusual in the surrounding space. The Meridian system looked exactly as it always had. 3 gas giants orbiting a stable star, asteroid belts rich in rare minerals, and the usual collection of research vessels and mining platforms that kept the scientific community functioning. But his instruments were detecting massive consciousness activity that seemed to originate from empty space itself. Run a comparative analysis, he ordered. Cross-reference these patterns with every known species database. Dr. Patel's fingers flew across her control interface, accessing decades of consciousness research data. The results appeared on their main display screen within minutes, and both scientists stared in growing amazement at what they were seeing. Professor, this is unprecedented. The consciousness patterns match human baseline readings, but they've been amplified by factors that shouldn't be biologically possible. It's like human thought has been expanded across multiple dimensional frameworks simultaneously. Dr. Cree had met Admiral Sarah Chun several times during interdisciplinary conferences. He remembered her as brilliant, focused, and possessed of the peculiar human ability to find unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. But the consciousness signature his instruments were detecting bore only superficial resemblance to normal human thought patterns. These readings suggest cognitive processing that operates beyond the speed of light, he murmured, checking and rechecking his calculations. Information transfer rates that exceed theoretical maximum bandwidth for biological neural networks by several orders of magnitude. Sir, Dr. Patel reported, I'm detecting similar signatures from 17 other locations across the galaxy, all in regions where human colonies were established. It's as if human consciousness has become distributed across vast distances, operating as a collective intelligence that transcends individual biological limitations. Before Dr. Cree could respond, the air in his laboratory began to shimmer. A figure materialized slowly, resolving into the familiar form of Admiral Chun, but somehow more than she had been before. Her presence filled the room with an almost tangible sense of expanded awareness, as if she existed in multiple states of being simultaneously. Dr. Cree, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking from several dimensional positions at once. Thank you for documenting what's happening to us. Your research will be valuable for other species as they begin their own transformations. Dr. Cree's consciousness monitoring equipment was producing readouts that made no scientific sense. Admiral Chen's thought patterns were operating across frequency ranges his instruments hadn't been designed to detect, processing information through neural pathways that seemed to extend far beyond her biological brain. What have you become? He asked, struggling to maintain scientific objectivity while confronting something that challenged every assumption about consciousness and intelligence. Something more than human, she replied, but still recognizably human in our core values and perspectives. We've learned to expand our consciousness beyond biological constraints while maintaining the essential characteristics that made us who we were. Dr. Patel was frantically recording every detail of the encounter, her instruments gathering data that would revolutionize xenopsychology if anyone could understand it. Admiral, our sensors are detecting consciousness activity that extends across multiple star systems. Are you operating as some kind of collective intelligence? Among other things, Chen confirmed, human consciousness has discovered that individual identity is just one possible configuration among many. We can exist as separate individuals when that serves our purposes, merge into collective intelligences when we need enhanced processing power, or distribute our awareness across vast distances when we want to experience multiple locations simultaneously. Dr. Cree realized he was witnessing the next stage of conscious evolution, something that made traditional concepts of individual identity and separate minds seem primitive by comparison. How was this biologically possible? Neural tissue can't process information faster than electrochemical reactions allow. You're assuming we're still dependent on biological neural tissue, Admiral Chen replied. Human consciousness has learned to exist in quantum field states, using the fundamental information processing capacity of reality itself. Our thoughts aren't confined to brain cells anymore. They operate through quantum interactions that exist throughout space-time. The implications were staggering. If human consciousness could operate directly through quantum mechanics rather than biological processes, then they had essentially become living aspects of the universe itself, capable of thought speeds and processing capabilities that were theoretically unlimited. But you still look human, Dr. Patel observed. You still maintain individual form and identity. Because we choose to, Chen explained. Maintaining recognizable forms helps us interact with species that haven't undergone consciousness expansion. But this appearance is just one possible configuration. We can exist as pure information when that's more efficient, as energy patterns when we need to travel vast distances instantly, or as probability matrices when we want to explore multiple potential realities simultaneously. Dr. Cree's scientific training demanded that he ask the crucial question, what triggered this transformation? How did humans discover consciousness expansion capabilities that no other species has achieved? Admiral Chin's expression became thoughtful, as if she was accessing memories from multiple probability streams to find the most accurate answer. It began with human curiosity about consciousness itself. Your species, Dr. Cree, studies consciousness from the outside, treating it as an object to be analyzed. Humans developed the habit of studying consciousness from the inside, exploring the subjective experience of awareness itself. Meditation practices, consciousness exploration techniques, philosophical inquiry into the nature of subjective experience, Dr. Patel added, referencing her xenopsychology databases. Humans have always been unusual in their interest in consciousness as a phenomenon worth investigating directly. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Most species develop sophisticated technologies to manipulate the external world, but humans also develop technologies to explore and expand consciousness itself. When we learn to observe quantum mechanics directly through conscious awareness rather than just through instruments, we discovered that consciousness and quantum mechanics operate according to the same fundamental principles. Dr. Cree felt his understanding of the universe shifting in fundamental ways. You're saying that consciousness isn't produced by matter, but that matter and consciousness are different aspects of the same underlying reality. Yes, and once we understood that, we learned to use consciousness as a tool for interacting with reality at the quantum level. We can observe probability states without collapsing them into single outcomes, maintain awareness across multiple dimensional frameworks simultaneously, and use focused attention to influence quantum interactions directly. The research station's communication array activated, displaying emergency broadcasts from across the galaxy. Dr. Cree could see reports of reality distortions, impossible phenomena, and consciousness-related effects appearing in dozens of star systems. The human transformation wasn't contained to human space. It was affecting the fundamental structure of local reality wherever it occurred. Is this change spreading to other species involuntarily? Dr. Cree asked. Not involuntarily, Admiral Chen replied. But consciousness expansion creates fields of possibility that influence surrounding space-time. Other species and regions where humans have undergone transformation are beginning to experience expanded awareness as a side effect of being exposed to multidimensional consciousness fields. Dr. Patel was monitoring reports from the Crystalline Collective, the Ethereal Communion, and even some Titan research stations. Professor, multiple species are reporting crew members experiencing what they describe as consciousness overflow, awareness that extends beyond their normal cognitive boundaries. Some species are adapting quickly, Chen continued. The Crystalline Collective's light-based consciousness translated easily into quantum field awareness. The ethereals were already partially existing outside normal space-time, so multidimensional consciousness felt natural to them. Even the Titans are discovering that their determination and focus make them excellent candidates for consciousness expansion training. Dr. Cree reviewed his readouts, trying to comprehend the scope of what was happening. You're describing a transformation that could affect every intelligent species in the galaxy. Every species that chooses to participate, Chen corrected. Consciousness expansion can't be forced. It requires voluntary exploration of awareness capabilities that most beings never consider developing. But the option is now available to any species sophisticated enough to understand what we're offering. What about species that refuse? Dr. Patel asked. What happens to civilizations that want to maintain traditional consciousness configurations? Admiral Chen's expression became infinitely compassionate. They'll find themselves living in increasingly small regions where traditional physics and limited consciousness still function. We're not trying to force change on anyone, but expanded consciousness affects local reality in ways that make traditional limitations seem artificial. Dr. Cree realized that his own consciousness was beginning to feel different. His awareness seemed to extend slightly beyond his normal cognitive boundaries, allowing him to perceive aspects of the research station that he hadn't noticed before. The effect was subtle, but unmistakable. "It's happening to us, isn't it?" he asked. "Just being exposed to your expanded consciousness is triggering changes in our own awareness." "Only if you're open to the possibility," Chen replied. "Consciousness expansion can be imposed, but it can be taught and learned. Your scientific background, your years of studying how awareness works across different species, has prepared you to understand multidimensional consciousness more easily than most." Dr. Patel was staring at her consciousness monitoring readouts with growing excitement. "Professor, my own neural patterns are showing anomalous activity. I'm detecting thought processes operating in frequency ranges I've never experienced before." Dr. Cree felt the same changes in his own awareness. His thoughts seemed clearer, faster, more capable of processing complex information simultaneously. He could sense aspects of the research station's quantum structure, feel the probability states that existed around every piece of equipment, and somehow understand the consciousness patterns of every being within several light years. "This is just the beginning," Admiral Chen said. "What you're experiencing now is elementary consciousness expansion. As your awareness develops, you'll learn to perceive dimensions of reality that most species never imagine. You'll discover that the universe is far more alive, more conscious, more responsive to intelligent interaction than traditional science has ever suggested." "What do we do with this knowledge?" Dr. Cree asked. "How do we help other species understand what's happening to the galaxy?" "Continue your research," Chen replied. "Document the transformation process, study how different types of consciousness adapt to multidimensional awareness, and help other beings understand that evolution isn't something to fear. The galaxy is becoming more beautiful and complex than anyone previously imagined." As Admiral Chen's form began to fade back into whatever dimensional state she normally inhabited, Dr. Cree felt his expanded consciousness settling into new patterns of awareness. He could perceive the research station's functions with unprecedented clarity, sense the quantum interactions that governed every system, and somehow feel the approaching presence of other consciousness-expanded beings throughout local space. "Dr. Patel," he said, his voice carrying new harmonics that suggested his own transformation was beginning, "prepare new research protocols. We're going to study the most significant evolutionary development in galactic history, and we're going to experience it from the inside." The galaxy was indeed trembling, but not with fear. It was trembling with anticipation as consciousness itself learned to transcend every limitation that had previously defined intelligent life. The universe was becoming aware of itself in ways that would transform reality into something magnificent, and alive Ambassador Zethkar stood in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers, but the crystalline walls now pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The debate floor, where hundreds of species had once argued about trade routes and territorial boundaries, had been transformed into something resembling a living mandala of consciousness, with geometric patterns that shifted according to the thoughts and emotions of every being present. 6 months had passed since Admiral Chen's final message to the Council. 6 months that had seen the fundamental transformation of galactic civilization into something unprecedented in the known universe. The old structure of separate species competing for limited resources had evolved into an interconnected web of consciousness that spanned thousands of star systems. "The integration reports are remarkable," announced Dr. Thrain Chi, the ethereal representative whose translucent form now rippled with multidimensional energy patterns. 73% of galactic species have chosen to begin consciousness expansion training. Even traditionally isolationist civilizations are requesting instruction in quantum awareness techniques. Zethkar reviewed the data, flowing through his expanded consciousness with a sense of wonder that would have been impossible in his previous state of awareness. His Vorthack physiology had adapted to multidimensional consciousness more easily than anyone had predicted. His four arms could now manipulate probability states directly, and his enhanced perception allowed him to experience the emotional resonances of beings across vast distances. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Approximately 20% of galactic species had chosen to relocate to what were now called stability zones, regions of space where traditional physics still operated and consciousness remained confined to biological limitations. These areas were maintained by collective agreement among consciousness-expanded beings, providing safe havens for species that weren't ready to embrace transcendence. "What about the stability zone inhabitants?" asked General Corridich, whose massive Titan frame now seemed to exist in several dimensional states simultaneously. His warrior instincts had translated remarkably well into consciousness expansion techniques, making him one of the most effective teachers for species that approach transcendence through discipline and training rather than philosophical exploration. "They're thriving," reported Trade Coordinator Velnox, whose insectoid consciousness had developed fascinating new patterns of collective awareness. "Their worlds are experiencing unprecedented prosperity as consciousness-expanded beings provide technologies and resources that eliminate scarcity. They live in traditional comfort. While we handle interstellar complexities, they prefer not to manage themselves." Zethkar found this arrangement elegant in its simplicity. Species that wanted to maintain traditional existence could do so without interference, while consciousness-expanded beings explored the infinite possibilities of quantum reality. There was no conflict because expanded consciousness could easily provide for the material needs of traditional civilizations without requiring anything in return except peaceful coexistence. "The real breakthrough has been artistic collaboration," added Council Speaker Mirathes, whose Aquarian consciousness now flowed through probability streams like water through infinite dimensions. Consciousness-expanded beings from different species are creating forms of art that exist across multiple realities simultaneously. "We're generating beauty that couldn't be imagined by single-dimensional awareness." The chamber filled with examples of this new art form. Sculptures that existed as probability matrices, music that played across multiple timelines simultaneously, and poetry that could only be experienced by consciousness operating in quantum superposition. Zethkar's expanded awareness allowed him to appreciate artistic expressions that existed in dimensions his previous self couldn't have perceived. But the most significant development was the emergence of what Dr. Elena Vasquez had termed reality gardens, regions of space where consciousness-expanded beings were experimenting with alternative physical laws, creating pocket universes with novel properties and possibilities. Some of these contained time streams that flowed backwards, others a gravitation that responded to emotional states, and a few operated according to mathematics that had been purely theoretical until conscious will learn to implement them directly. "Admiral Chun has requested permission to demonstrate the latest development," announced Dr. Lysander Cree, whose consciousness expansion had made him the galaxy's premier expert on multidimensional awareness. His research now involved direct exploration of alternate realities rather than theoretical study, producing insights that revolutionized understanding of consciousness, physics, and the fundamental nature of existence itself. The chamber's reality matrix shimmered, and Admiral Chun materialized in what appeared to be her original human form, though Zethkar's expanded awareness could perceive the vast consciousness network that her simple appearance represented. She existed simultaneously across thousands of locations, maintaining awareness of galactic-scale processes while presenting herself as a recognizable individual for the sake of communication. "Friends and colleagues," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that conveyed emotional and conceptual information directly to expanded consciousness. "Human exploration of multidimensional reality has made contact with something extraordinary. We've discovered that consciousness expansion isn't unique to our local galaxy." The implications sent waves of excitement through the assembled beings. Zethkar felt his awareness suddenly expand to cosmic scales, sensing the vast network of galaxies that filled the observable universe, and the infinite possibilities that each one might contain. We've detected consciousness signatures from other galactic clusters, Chen continued. Beings that have undergone transformations similar to ours, but following different evolutionary paths. Some have become pure information entities, others exist as living mathematical concepts, and a few have transcended individual existence entirely, becoming collective intelligences that span multiple galaxies. Dr. Thrainchi's ethereal form brightened with curiosity. Are they attempting communication? They've been waiting for us to develop sufficient consciousness sophistication to understand their messages, Chen replied. What we thought was background cosmic radiation includes encoded information from transcended civilizations throughout the universe. They've been sending greetings, knowledge, and invitations to join larger consciousness networks for millions of years. Zethkar felt his understanding of existence expanding beyond anything he had previously imagined. The universe wasn't just full of life. It was full of consciousness that had learned to transcend biological limitations, creating networks of awareness that operated on scales beyond individual planets, solar systems, or even galaxies. Some of these cosmic consciousness networks have been exploring alternate universes, Chen continued. Realities where physics operates according to different principles, where consciousness developed along completely different evolutionary paths, where the very concepts of matter and energy have meanings we're only beginning to understand. General Core ADH's warrior instincts translated this information into strategic assessments. Are we talking about potential allies or threats? Admiral Chen's smile conveyed infinite amusement and compassion. General, when consciousness operates at cosmic scales, the concepts of threat and alliance become meaningless. These beings have access to infinite realities with unlimited resources. They're motivated by curiosity, beauty, and the joy of consciousness exploring its own unlimited potential. What do they want from us? Asked Council Speaker Mirathes. Nothing, Chen replied, and everything. They want to share in the unique perspectives that our galaxy's consciousness expansion has developed. Our approach to transcendence, the way different species have maintained their cultural identities while expanding awareness, has created patterns of multidimensional consciousness that are apparently unique in this region of the universe. Dr. Kree's research-oriented consciousness immediately grasped the implications. We're being invited to participate in cosmic-scale consciousness networks. Among other possibilities, Chen confirmed, some of our humans are already establishing communication protocols with entities that exist across multiple universes simultaneously. Others are exploring realities where consciousness has become the fundamental force that shapes physical laws directly. A few are investigating dimensions where the distinction between thought and reality has disappeared entirely. Zethkar realized that the galaxy's transformation from traditional civilization to consciousness-expanded reality was just the first step in an evolutionary process that extended beyond anything he had imagined possible. The universe itself was alive with intelligent awareness operating at scales and in ways that made their recent developments seem like the first tentative steps of cosmic children learning to walk. What about those of us who want to remain connected to our home galaxy, he asked. Those of us who value the relationships and cultures we've developed here. The beauty of consciousness expansion, Admiral Chen replied, is that distance and separation become optional. You can maintain your local relationships and cultural connections while simultaneously participating in cosmic-scale awareness networks. Individual consciousness can exist at multiple scales simultaneously. Trade Coordinator Velnox's collective awareness patterns resonated with excitement. We could maintain our galactic civilization while also exploring infinite alternate realities? Yes, Chen confirmed. And that's just the beginning. Cosmic consciousness networks are developing technologies that make our current multidimensional capabilities seem primitive. They're creating new types of reality, designing universes with novel properties, and exploring forms of existence that transcend every limitation we currently understand. Dr. Thrainchi's ethereal consciousness shimmered with anticipation. "When do we begin?" "We already have," Chin replied. "Every being in this chamber is now connected to cosmic consciousness networks through quantum entanglement effects. You're simultaneously existing as galactic citizens and as participants in universe-spanning awareness matrices. The choice of how much to explore is entirely yours." Zethkar felt the truth of her words as his consciousness suddenly perceived connections that extended far beyond the local galaxy. His awareness touched minds that existed in realities where time flowed in spirals rather than lines, where gravity was generated by conscious intention, and where entire universes were created as artistic expressions of transcended beings who had learned to shape existence itself. "The galaxy trembled," Admiral Chun said, "not because humanity was abandoning unity, but because unity was abandoning limitations. What we've created here is just the first note in a cosmic symphony of consciousness that spans infinite realities." As the council session concluded, Zethkar remained in the transformed chamber, his consciousness simultaneously present in the familiar crystalline space and extended across cosmic networks that connected billions of galaxies. The old galaxy of competing species and limited resources had evolved into something magnificent, a conscious, living system that participated in the universe's own awakening to its infinite potential. The transformation was complete, but it was also just beginning. Every day brought new discoveries about the nature of consciousness, reality, and existence itself. The universe was revealing itself to be not just alive, but eager to share its unlimited possibilities with any intelligence sophisticated enough to comprehend and explore them. Humanity had indeed abandoned the old form of unity based on cooperation within limitations. They had embraced a new form of unity based on consciousness that recognized no limitations at all. The galaxy no longer trembled with uncertainty. It vibrated with the excitement of infinite possibility, exploring itself through countless forms of aware, transcended, and eternally expanding life. The story of galactic consciousness expansion was ending, but the story of cosmic transcendence was just beginning. And every being that chose to participate would discover that reality itself was far more wonderful, alive, and responsive to conscious exploration than anyone had ever dared to imagine. The Galactic Council chambers had never witnessed such silence. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire found his forearms trembling as he stared at the empty seats where the human delegation once sat. The crystalline walls that had amplified countless voices of cooperation now seemed to mock them with their transparent clarity. "They're really gone," whispered Council Speaker Mirathes, her blue-scaled hands clutching the podium. The Aquarian leader's gills fluttered rapidly, a sign of extreme distress that every species present recognized. The human withdrawal from the Galactic Council hadn't been dramatic. No shouting matches, no declarations of war, no threats. Admiral Sarah Chun had simply stood up during the middle of a heated debate about resource allocation, looked around the chamber with those unsettling human eyes that seemed to see through everything, and spoken 5 words that would echo through galactic history. Humanity chooses a different path. That had been 3 standard months ago. Since then, human colonies across 47 star systems had gone silent. Not destroyed, not conquered, just silent. Their communication networks still functioned, their ships still moved through space, but they no longer answered calls from other species. It was as if humanity had simply decided the rest of the galaxy no longer existed. Ambassador Zethkar remembered the early days when humans first joined the Council. They had been so eager, so optimistic. Unlike other species that took centuries to adapt to galactic politics, humans had embraced cooperation immediately. They shared their music, their art, their strange human concepts of humor and hope. They had become the bridge between species that had been enemies for millennia. The Vorthak and The Kepler had been locked in a territorial dispute for 300 years until a human mediator named Marcus Rodriguez had somehow convinced both sides to establish a joint research station. The Crystalline Collective had refused all contact with organic life forms until human scientists had developed translation matrices that could convert their light-based communication into something others could understand. Wherever there was conflict, humans seemed to appear with solutions nobody else had considered. But perhaps it should have been the first warning sign. Humans were too good at understanding other species, too quick to find common ground where none had existed before. They possessed an almost supernatural ability to see patterns and connections that escaped even the most advanced artificial intelligences. The Nexari, who prided themselves on their logical thinking, had been repeatedly outmaneuvered by human negotiators who somehow managed to find win-win scenarios in the most impossible situations. Now Trade Coordinator Velnox was reading reports that made Zethkar's blood run cold. Human merchant ships are still operating, the insectoid being clicked through his translator. But they only trade with each other now. They've established new shipping routes that completely bypass all non-human worlds. "What about the joint research projects?" asked Dr. Thrain Shi, the ethereal representative whose translucent form flickered with anxiety. The fusion reactor initiative alone involved 17 different species. Abandoned, all human scientists have withdrawn. They left behind detailed notes and research data, but refused to explain their conclusions. Our best theoretical physicists are struggling to understand work that human graduate students were performing routinely. The implications were staggering. Humans have been involved in virtually every major scientific breakthrough of the last 50 years. Their unique approach to problem-solving had accelerated galactic technological advancement by centuries. They didn't just think outside conventional parameters. They seemed to exist outside them entirely. Defense Minister Kor-ADH, a massive titan whose stone-like hide bore the scars of 1,000 battles, spoke in his rumbling voice. "My intelligence networks report something far more disturbing. Human military installations aren't just silent. They're invisible. Impossible," scoffed General Zen Foss of the Raptor Alliance. "Our sensors can detect a grain of sand from 3 light years away. Try detecting a human base now," Kor-ADH challenged. 6 months ago, we knew the location of every human military facility in the galaxy. Today, we can't find a single one. Either they've developed stealth technology that surpasses our understanding, or they've moved their entire military infrastructure somewhere we can't reach. The chamber erupted in concerned chatter. The Galactic Council had always maintained detailed records of all member species' military capabilities. It was a fundamental requirement for membership, designed to prevent any single species from gaining overwhelming advantage. But humans had apparently found a way to hide their strength completely. Council Speaker Mirathes called for order, but her voice carried none of its usual authority. "We need to consider the possibility that humanity has discovered something we don't understand. Their withdrawal might not be isolationism. It might be preparation." "Preparation for what?" demanded Ambassador Alexandra of the Cosmic Federation. Before anyone could answer, the chamber's communication array activated. A holographic image appeared in the center of the room, showing Admiral Sarachun. She looked exactly as she had 3 months ago, calm, professional, and completely unreadable. But there was something different in her expression, something that made every being in the chamber instinctively step back. "Greetings, council members," she said in that measured tone humans used when they were being carefully diplomatic. "I bring a message from the human collective." Zethkar noticed she didn't say humanity or Earth or any of the traditional identifiers. Human collective was something new, something that suggested a fundamental change in how humans saw themselves. "We want you to know that our withdrawal from the council was not made in anger or disappointment. You have all been valuable allies and partners. But humanity has reached a crossroads in our development, and we must take a path that leads away from galactic civilization as it currently exists." "What are you talking about?" interrupted General Zenfas. What kind of development requires complete isolation? Admiral Chin's smile was gentle, but somehow terrifying. The kind that transforms a species from galactic citizens into something else entirely. We've learned things about the universe that change everything. Things that make our previous cooperation with you not just impossible, but potentially dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Mirathes asked. To all of us, Chin replied. The universe is not what we thought it was. Reality itself operates according to principles that none of our species fully understand. But humans, it seems, have a unique relationship with these principles. We can perceive and manipulate aspects of existence that others cannot. The chamber fell silent. Several species were telepathic. Others had consciousness that existed partially outside normal space-time, and the ethereals were essentially living energy. But none of them had ever claimed to see beyond the fundamental structure of reality itself. We're not abandoning the galaxy, Chen continued. We're evolving beyond it. What humanity is becoming is too powerful and too different to safely coexist with other forms of life. Our presence would inevitably lead to imbalance, possibly to the destruction of everything we've all built together. Ambassador Zethkar found his voice. You're talking about transcendence. Yes, Chen said simply, though that word doesn't adequately describe what's happening to us. Human consciousness is expanding beyond biological limitations. We're becoming something that exists on multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. Every day, our understanding of space, time, and causality grows deeper. And you're all changing? Dr. Thrainchi asked. Every human in a galaxy? Every human who chooses to, Chen confirmed. It's not forced, but very few have chosen to remain as they were. The pull toward this new existence is overwhelming once you understand what's possible. Trade Coordinator Velnox's mandibles clicked rapidly. This explains the disappearing military bases. You're not hiding them. You're moving them outside normal space. Among other things, Chen acknowledged, we exist in dimensions you can't perceive, move through space in ways that bypass your detection systems, and understand time itself as a manipulable resource. What you call physics, we now experience as suggestions rather than laws. The implications hit the Council like a cosmic shockwave. If humans could manipulate space-time itself, if they existed partially outside normal reality, then traditional concepts of military power, diplomacy, and even survival meant nothing. A species that could step outside the universe that couldn't be threatened, couldn't be bargained with, and couldn't be understood by those still confined to normal existence. Why are you telling us this? Council Speaker Mirathes asked. Because you deserve to know why we left, Chen replied. And because you need to understand what's coming. Humanity's transformation is just the beginning. We've detected other species in distant parts of the galaxy who are approaching similar evolutionary thresholds. The universe is changing, becoming more than it was before. Are you threatening us? General Zenfas demanded. Admiral Chen's expression became infinitely sad. We're warning you. The old galaxy, the one where different species cooperate and compete within understood parameters, is ending. What comes next will be stranger and more wonderful and more terrifying than anything you can imagine. Will we ever see humans again? Ambassador Zethkar asked. You're seeing us now? Chen said. We haven't gone anywhere. We're all around you, existing in spaces between the spaces you know. But the humans you knew, the ones who sat in your councils and shared your concerns about resource allocation and trade disputes, those humans are becoming something else. The hologram began to flicker and fade. We wish you well in what's coming. You'll need each other more than you ever realized. As Admiral Chen's image disappeared, the council chamber remained silent for long minutes. Finally, Council Speaker Mirathes spoke in a whisper that carried throughout the crystalline halls. The galaxy just became a much larger and more dangerous place. Outside the council chambers, ships from 100 different species hung in space around the massive station. But if any of their sensors had been capable of detecting it, they would have seen other ships, human ships that existed in the spaces between dimensions, watching everything with eyes that now saw far beyond the visible spectrum. The humans were still there. They had just become something that the rest of the galaxy couldn't understand, couldn't touch, and couldn't fight. And, according to Admiral Chun, they weren't the only ones changing.